Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Friend Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, and today I'm joined by Marius Roodt, our man in London. Marius, how are you doing?
How's it, Nick? How's it going?
It's, jealously looking to the north to see that you have electricity. Apart from the electricity, it's going fine. And joined by our man in Limpopo, Mr. Tiego Thotse. Tiego, how are you doing?
Good, thanks. And how are you, Nick? Hi there, Marius.
How's it?
I'm pretty good, but I got an inverter which really helps to control some of the problems with power. But I've now gotten to the stage where I no longer know if the electricity is on or off because I've stopped paying attention. So I'll go and switch on the kettle, it just won't come on. And then I'm like, oh wait, power's off, whatever. Okay, but I'm sure everyone is familiar with that feeling. So let's talk a little bit about perhaps what the government is saying behind closed doors. So we talked a little bit yesterday about how the ANC's National Executive Committee, its highest decision-making body, was unable to talk properly about the Eskom issue over the weekend, but apparently they managed to discuss it on Monday. The NEC meeting went on for 3 days, which perhaps shows that it wasn't the most efficient discussion. But anyway, they did get to the topic of Eskom, and understandably, considering the beating that government is taking for this, there was a lot of anxiousness and upsetness and dissatisfaction by members of the ANC NEC. So much so that the reason we know about what was happening in the meeting so intimately is because very obviously someone in the meeting leaked an enormous amount of it to News 24 because it has lots of quotes from an anonymous person who I think is probably the same person. There were some who called for a state of emergency on the energy crisis. As I said, as the source said, especially when you consider what this means for townships and other areas. Others believed it was time that the Department of Public Enterprises was finally dismantled and Eskom be moved to the Department of Energy. And apparently this is going to be a debate at the ANC's policy conference. Minister Pravin Gordhan was attacked by some members of the meeting, saying that his reports were very technical and offered few solutions because apparently he just talked about like how damaged the infrastructure was and how difficult it was to make sure that it was working back online again. There was also an attack on Gordhan for blaming sabotage. Apparently some members of the ANC said people felt that if sabotage is to blame, then why not call on the security cluster to take action? What does Pravin mean by sabotage? And then apparently Gordhan said that he has not been properly supported. And apparently people in the NEC are very worried that they look like they are not doing enough to solve the crisis. Well, I'm glad that they're aware of this because that's very much my impression, is that everyone can see that very little action, concrete action, seems to be being taken by government, and the president has, as is his wont during national crises, has been rather quiet. And of course, that was also brought up in attacks on government by members of the NEC. So, interesting stuff. This is obviously causing a lot of friction inside the ANC because of, well, the great crisis and the tumbling poll numbers, which I'm sure they are probably seeing behind the scenes there. But Marius, what do you make of some of these suggestions? So let's start with this declaring a state of emergency and also maybe dismantling the Department of Public Enterprises. What do you think about that?
Well, implementing state of emergency is obviously ridiculous because a state of emergency, it's better than a state of disaster because it can't actually get renewed like a state of disaster is renewed. But state of emergency is much more serious. Basically, all civil liberties can be suspended in a state of emergency. So you wouldn't be able to complain about not having electricity in a state of emergency. In theory, the government could throw you in jail for putting on, Twitter or whatever, Eskom are, a bunch of idiots. So it's one of these pie in the sky suggestions. It makes no sense. Why do we need a state of emergency? I mean, the solutions have been in front of us for literally years. Let more independent power producers come in, maybe more nuclear. I'm not an energy expert, but there's so many proposed solutions out there. So, and also the issues, Eskom's not an overnight fix. There's no, even if we decide now on something that we that will fix Eskom. It's still going to take 2 or 3 years now to get out of the mess that we're in. So state of emergency is not really going to work. It's all just, what needs to happen is the ANC needs to actually let go of, what's in control of. And part of it's because of the ideology of the ANC that's got to, it's got to centralize power around it and so on. But on that note, maybe the dismantling of the Department of Public Enterprise isn't such a bad idea. And maybe that's also the thin end of the wedge. We can start looking to get rid of a lot of the SOEs and what have you. Because, Eskom, it's a monopoly on electricity, and that's why we have this problem. That's why there's been all these blackouts, because workers at Eskom, not all of them obviously, but some of the various elements have been able to, go on this wildcat strike, and it's plunged South Africa into stage 6 load shedding, which is, it's absolute disgrace. Just apart from the inconvenience, people are going to lose jobs. People, people who run shops are going to be able to trade. Also, just it's a stuff up from everywhere.
And in the middle of winter like this, particularly older people, some of them are actually at risk of dying when it gets this cold.
Yeah, so it's a disaster overall. But I think what does show you, though, that the ANC is that they know that there's quite a good chance now that they're going to lose the next election, I think. And this is why they are trying to at least act as if there's some sense of urgency, which, I'm not sure if there really is, but they're trying to make it seem as they're actually trying to fix this crisis. And, the ANC has in the past instructed people at Eskom to burn as much diesel as possible to keep the lights on before elections. So that is one of the things where I think the night before an election, if there's stage 6 load shedding, the ANC is going to be in huge trouble. So maybe we should actually hope that there's stage 6 load shedding until just before 2024, because that will probably be the end of the ANC. But I think that does show that the ANC is actually looking at the poll numbers, and people say maybe the ANC doesn't react to pressure at the ballot box, but I think they do. And I think this is really starting to focus some minds in the ANC. So we'll see what happens.
So something that you said, Marius, and also what Ruan is saying here in the comments about, the immediate cause of this particular crisis that's made load shedding so much worse is this strike. And what's interesting in all of these comments from this NEC member that were reported by News 24 is no one mentions the unions. It's as though they are not in the picture at all. And yet that is essentially they're holding the country to ransom for I think they were originally demanding a twice inflation increase.
Yeah, I think they wanted 15%, something like that.
Right. So apparently, according to the latest news, they've come down to 7, but want a one-time bonus of 15,000 Rand. But Tieko, why is the ANC just not willing to talk about the role that the unions have played in this?
Well, I wonder if it's the case that they completely did not talk about them, or it's just the particular person that the article that the journalist interviewed for this particular article who decided not to focus on the rest of the conversation. There are infights within the ANC. So you do expect that when one member of the ANC is sharing a story of the ANC, they wouldn't share the full story. But on my part, I agree with everything that Marius has said around the whole topic. It doesn't make logical sense that with so many ideas available, you want to declare a national state of disaster just so you can deal with this crisis. The solution to the electricity crisis in South Africa is quite clear. It's a very simple solution, actually. You just need to open up the market, allow the free market economy to go as it should go, and allow people, the private sector, entrepreneurs, and everyone else to come up with ideas of how they can deal with this, produce electricity, sell to residents. It's really not that hard of a thing. But again, here we are dealing with dunderheads, like I always say. That's the reality of the matter, sure.
I think that's the first time anyone's used dunderheads on the other show, but it's such a good insult. Okay. I think really for me what we're seeing here is that so I agree with you, Tieko. They may have talked about the role that the unions are playing, and maybe there was some pressure put on them behind the scenes to negotiate to lower their demands. But it's clear that the ANC is not willing to publicly attack the unions in any way, despite the role that they've played. And this is once again the sort of the problem that we've continuously had in South Africa over the last 30 years, where you've got sort of politically connected big business, often through BEE, but also just through sort of sycophants or people looking for contracts of all races and creeds. And then you've got big labor with the sort of labor aristocracy of COSATU. And then you've got big government all collaborating together. And once again, Eskom seems to be right at the nexus of this problem. Marius, this is your phrase that I'm stealing here. Do you have any final comments?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I like to talk about the unholy trinity of those three. And as you say, they've worked to retard South African growth, obviously, and it locks out people out of the labor markets. As you say, the labor aristocracy. And at the same time, I mean, I'm not inherently opposed to unions. Of course, people get exploited, and often people get paid less than they should be getting paid, and so on. But we've seen what's happened here. There's been a handful of people who've held Eskom and effectively the whole country to ransom, and people like Ivan Jim at NUMSA are some of the most toxic people in South African discourse. And nobody's saying that people at Eskom shouldn't be paid a decent wage and whatever, but to actually basically destroy South African infrastructure and plunge it into stage 6 load shedding. I mean, that's maybe an exaggeration, but I don't think it's far off to say it's treason, really.
Right. I mean, that's exactly it. Eskom is 400 billion rand in debt. The country is sort of on its knees in a lot of ways. Guys, now is not the what's the phrase that really annoying people use on Twitter? Read the room.
Yeah, exactly.
I think in this case that may be appropriate.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's go on to the next topic for today, and this is a call from the South African Police Union, who say that the only way to stop the killing of police officers is to declare the murder of any police officers treason. This comes from a statement released by the police union after an off-duty Gugulethu police officer was shot dead in Delft, Cape Town on Sunday morning. 3 people have been arrested for it. In a statement, the local police said the 31-year-old constable stationed at Gugulethu police station was gunned down at around 3:30 in Delaya Street, Delft South, and robbed of his vehicle. Our investigation led to the discovery of the vehicle in Elsis River on Sunday morning and the subsequent arrest of the suspects. The police union spokesperson said, "We are taking police killings seriously, but government and SAPS are not. We want President Cyril Ramaphosa to declare the killing of police officers as treason because it is a crime against the state. The sentencing should be a harsher one. Training a police officer does not take a day. Currently, we don't have enough boots on the ground, and if the killings continue, we will see a further shortage of officers." The Western Cape POP Crew Secretary, that's the Police Prison Civil Rights Union, said that the killing of police is tragic and disgusting. Police killings is a crisis, and we are not happy about it at all. Drastic measures must be put in place to curb police killings, especially in the Western Cape, because it's getting really bad. Apparently, at least 27 police officers, both on and off duty, have been murdered in the first 3 months of 2022, according to the police ministry. And a police spokesperson went on to say the killing of our men and women in blue is an attack on the authority of the state and further undermines the rule of law. We have ensured maximum mobilization of resources to apprehend these killers. We will not arrest until they're apprehended in answer to these senseless attacks and killings. So, Marius, this is a very real problem because, it's already our police are not performing great, as we well know, and if they're being murdered, they're probably not going to perform particularly any much better. It's an absolute horror when this happens. But what do you make of the suggestion by the police union that police murders should be made treason?
Yeah, I don't think it'll make too much difference. As we're talking before the show, you said, just enforce the current laws. It's already illegal to kill somebody. So, and also if you do get caught, I mean, you do get a minimum sentence of 20 years in South Africa, as far as I know, if you murder somebody. Some people say that's not long enough, but if 20 years in a South African jail that's overcrowded and run by dangerous gangsters isn't enough to put you off committing a serious crime, then the death penalty or 30 years in jail or whatever it is isn't going to put you off either. So we just need to, but people, it's proven fact around the world, death penalty doesn't deter anybody. What deters people is your risk of getting caught. And in South Africa, we know we've got lots of problems in the police service and what have you, and lack of skills and all this kind of thing. But also, it comes down to a deeper problem. There's lots of, as you know, there's lots of crime in areas of Cape Town and what have you, and a lot of that is because of gang crime, and a lot of that is because people. I'm sure most people who are in gangs, if you ask them when they were 15, do you want to be in a gang one day? Probably a lot of them have said no. But there's no opportunities. There's no opportunities to, get gainful employment or to go to university or whatever the case is. And often that's the only way that people can find a way out of poverty or, be admired by other people in the community, because there is such a lack of opportunity. So it's a much deeper issue than this. But also there we need to look at, there is probably a shortage of police in South Africa, but then we also need to decentralize police. We need to allow provincial police services to be formed. The Western Cape is pushing for this. So there's some controversy over whether the Constitution actually does allow that. But yeah, that's one thing that needs to happen. I mean, there's so much, even if we do declare a murder of policeman treason, fine. But that is not going to go, that's not going to change much. And there's so many core issues that actually have to be addressed before we can actually fix this whole thing.
Right, and just on the issue of gangs, I want to add on that obviously, as you say, economic issues I think are a big problem, but also, the gangs just have such sort of impunity of force that, as far as I understand, they will threaten someone who owes them money, and then he'll offer his son as like a recruit for the gangs, or sometimes the gangs, you have to join one because the streets are so lawless that the only way to be protected from being attacked by a gang is to join a gang. And this is, not a sustainable solution. And obviously you need the police to kind of take back control of the streets so that the gangs can't just operate as some sort of parallel government. But Tiego, do you agree with Marius that the real problem here is implementation?
I agree with Marius entirely that the real problem is implementation. But let me quickly go to a comment that one of the people who's quoted in the article says that training a police officer takes only but a day. And I think that's where most of our
problems... He said the opposite. He says it does not take a day.
Oh shucks! I thought that's what he said. I was about to say that it's a real issue, but I must still speak to the point that our police are not well trained. You compare the police that we have currently versus police that the apartheid government had. You look at training centers that the apartheid government had built, like one that's in Pretoria Central. It used to function quite well during the apartheid days, surprisingly, and today it's not working very well. But let me get back to the main point regarding the treason issue. I think I am not a law person, but I think the law already as it is does make space for that. It does make space for that, right? In the sense that it defines treason in many ways and says that taking the security cluster, national security cluster, and police form part of that could possibly be referred to as treason at the end of the day. So I think there's already room for that. But more than anything, I don't think simply declaring killing of police treason will assist the situation. And beyond that, you have police are killed for different reasons. For example, you go to Pretoria Sunnyside, you find the police working with drug dealers on the streets there. On a daily basis, drug dealers are selling drugs. At the end of the day, they come and collect their money. So there are other battles that police have with criminals and stuff of that nature that really don't have anything to do with the state and us as citizens. So if you do declare it treason, ultimately, I think you'd still have to come up with rules around which particular police and whatnot and stuff of that nature.
Right.
I think.
Yeah, you don't want to be defending the honor of dirty cops who are getting involved in drug gangs and drug wars. I think that's a really good point. Yeah, that point you made about the apartheid police, I mean, of course they were well trained. A minority of the population managed to suppress a majority of the population. They could only do that through well-trained police and soldiers. So, I think the lesson there is one should perhaps take the good and discard the bad. Presumably have police who are more humane, but at least are able to perform their roles effectively rather than what we currently have, which is a demoralized, demotivated, and often slightly clueless police force. Although that's not to say that there aren't very hardworking people in there, but everything I've ever heard about the police service is that it's a struggle, and I will recount an anecdote of a family member of mine who went to lay a charge of assault at a police station, and an officer was assigned to investigate it, but the video evidence was difficult for him to collect because the station's email service didn't work and he had no data to receive the thing via WhatsApp, the video evidence. So, how are you supposed to investigate a crime when this is what you're trying to work with? Marius, any final thoughts?
Yeah, no, not really. But I mean, I think the point of well-trained police is an important one. But I think there's also an issue towards the end of apartheid. There was a thing called kitsconstables, as far as I know, and people, because the apartheid state was obviously struggling to control, the country and whatever, and they'd often, the recruit guys and give them kind of 2 weeks training or not even, and they were basically glorified thugs. And they'd go and, and that's where they'd be running battles in townships against protesters and whatever. But that's obviously not a way we want to go down. We don't want to have this kind of police who's actually enforcers. We want them, they should be a service to people and, ensure that and treat law-abiding citizens properly and whatever. And people shouldn't be scared of the police unless you have actually committed a crime. But yeah, I think we have a long way to go to fixing the South African police service.
Indeed. So our next topic, we're going to move to our northern neighbor. And any students of Southern African history will know that 1,000 years ago, the Kingdom of Great Zimbabwe, for which the modern country of Zimbabwe is named after, was an important trading center that exported its gold across the world, all the way, in some cases, to China through an Indian Ocean trade network. And it became a sort of renowned source of many sort of precious goods, ivory, gold, that kind of thing. And it looks like Zimbabwe is nostalgic for those days because its central bank has said that it is going to start selling gold coins this month as a store of value in an attempt to control inflation, which has recently shot up again. So annual inflation hit 192% in Zimbabwe in June, and this has completely decimated President Emmerson Mnangagwa's attempt to fix the Zimbabwean economy. This was kind of his promise when he overthrew Mugabe in a coup, was that he was going to put Zimbabwe back on track. Zimbabwe had to abandon its own currency in 2009 and then started using the US dollar. But this was very difficult and impractical for some reasons. And also the government was missing its ability to print money and raise some quick cash. So it reintroduced the local currency in 2019, but that rapidly lost value. And it looks like the Zimbabwe is heading back to alternative forms of currency once again. So Zimbabwe is going to firstly be implementing these coins, which, and I'm not going to try to pronounce the name, but they are named after Victoria Falls in I think it's in Shona. And these coins can be converted into cash and traded locally and internationally. They'll contain 1 troy ounce of gold and will be sold by Fidelity Gold Refinery, Oryx, and local banks. They've also reintroduced foreign currency, particularly the US dollar, into their economy in an attempt to control inflation, as it seems like their new currency is becoming worthless once again. Tiego, what do you make of this? It seems like a kind of a good thing for the Zimbabwean government to do, but once again, we're sort of, I think we see warning lessons from our neighbor up north.
Yeah, no, I think every official in the Zimbabwean government should probably be taken to a grade 4 class, be brought to a grade 4 economics class here in South Africa, just so they can be taught basic economics, what supply is and what demand is, and how to grow the economy moving from there. This doesn't help the situation. They'll get money now. Policies that they have, they remain with bad policies. I read an article today that was speaking about, I think, Nicky Oppenheimer in a case that he has in Zimbabwe against the government. It's a fight around the land. He owns a farm that side, and they want to start mining on some of the farm without his permission. They want to do it forcefully and stuff of that nature. Those are the kind of things that end up collapsing an economy, because no one wants to invest in such an economy whereby I could buy property today. Tomorrow you tell me that, no, we're going to do 1, 2, 3 here without your permission. So they should get their story right, go back, fix their policies, attend a grade 4 economics class, and yeah, take it from there. This doesn't help the situation in the long term. They need more sustainable solutions to the crisis.
That's exactly right. You can't run off the US dollar forever, I don't think. Marius, what do you make of this?
Yeah, as I say, it's not a sustainable solution. There have also been proposals that they join the common monetary area, which is South Africa, Lesotho, Eswatini, and Namibia, where the South African rand is legal tender, and those countries' currencies are pegged at 1-to-1 to the rand. But then you're going to have the exact same problems as you do now, where you're not going to be able to you can't change your interest rates and so on. Your interest rates are pegged to that country's currency, so their interest rates would be pegged to the South African South African interest rates. And also, I know in Namibia, it's actually a bit of a problem. The Namibian dollar, if it wasn't pegged to the rand, would be about 20% not as valuable, which is actually Namibian exports are actually too expensive, and that's actually damaging for the country's economy. So yeah, it's not a sustainable solution to. You can have common currencies. Obviously, the euro seems to work fairly well in Europe, and it's worked in some other places. But I don't think it's really a solution for Zimbabwe. I think, as Tiego says, you just need to send them to some kind of elementary economics class and explain how things work. Because obviously it's just an issue of printing money to pay for. We've seen what happens. It's happening in Sri Lanka now as well, and the country's busy falling apart because of what they call modern monetary theory, and that's exactly what Zimbabwe did. So yeah, it's not a sustainable solution, but maybe this will surprise us. Maybe they'll actually be go back to the kind of the gold standard. And we'll see some people in the US, people like Ron Paul, might be getting quite excited about this. So I'm sure you'll be watching what's happening in Zimbabwe with a keen eye.
Yeah, well, once you've tried everything, kind of gold is, I guess, the last refuge. Okay, so let's move on to our very last one here, and this is a very quick story we're just going to do. Back after the Marikana massacre, President Ramaphosa he was a director at Lonmin, the mine at the time, and he was taken to court by some of the Marikana miners who said that he bore legal responsibility for the massacre because he had improperly influenced the police to act aggressively against the miners in order to protect his business interests at the Marikana mine. However, the High Court heard legal arguments from both sides and found that it agreed with the president's arguments that the plaintiffs had not established that the president bore any legal duty in relation to the Marikana tragedy. There was no trial here. It was just a discussion of sort of the legal principles at play here. So obviously a win for the president, because the last thing he needs right now is to be put into court for, as to decide whether he's guilty of, improperly influencing the Marikana massacre. Marius, what do you make of this?
I think it's the correct finding, actually. I don't think you can say that President Ramaphosa actually had any direct influence over what happened in Marikana. That's, again, I think was a failure of the police, taking on a bunch of protesters with live ammunition instead of tear gas and water cannons or whatever the proper protocol is. I'm pretty sure the real protocol is not to go with live ammunition and automatic weapons. So I think it's probably the correct finding. But I still think Marikana is obviously a stain on post-apartheid South Africa, and it's something that the president's. I'm not sure if he's ever actually said anything about it, and said what a terrible event it was. So I still think it's definitely a stain on his reputation, though.
Tiego, your thoughts very briefly.
Well, I agree with everything that Marius has already said. The only thing I would bring to light is that, amazingly, a lot of times when we talk about the Marikana massacre, we don't speak about the people murdered the day before the police went on to murder the workers. So I think I'd love to see more of that happen in future, just so there's a balanced story. But I'm in full agreement with Marius that Ramaphosa did not do anything wrong in this instance, unless, of course, there was another private call that we don't have evidence to. But the court is correct to make the judgment that they made.
No, definitely. All right, that's all we have time for today. So thank you very much for listening. We hope that you found the show interesting. We will, of course, be back with you tomorrow for the Daily French Show. and hopefully we will soon have much more stable electricity. Wouldn't that be nice? Anyway, I hope you are all surviving the winter and the load shedding and all the other things that are going on right now. And I hope you have a great day. Cheers, everyone.